Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, in the backdrop of the recent meeting between India's Honorable Prime Minister and the US President Donald Trump, we are going to analyze the developing relations between the two nations on several pillars, as for example, economy and defense. Then, in the second topic, we'll try to examine the issue of glacial lake outburst flood in the context of the recently announced dam on Teesta River in Sikkim. Then from your simplified section, we'll take up 5 news. We will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide the much important value addition and practice questions keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2025. So, stay tuned. The recent India's Prime Minister and US President meeting has actually given a new shape to India-US bilateral ties in changing the geopolitics of the 21st century, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of international relations and the policies of developed nation and their impact on our country's interest. So when we talk about USA, which is the world's oldest democracy, formed in the year of 1786 with the adoption of Constitution by the Congress of Philadelphia, and India, which is the largest democracy of the world with more than 1.4 billion population, the relationship between the two nations, the two global powers, has actually evolved into a global strategic partnership based upon shared democratic values and the kind of convergence of interest on various bilateral as well as global issues, such as, for example, the rise of China. The idea is that this relationship, these ties, has been further strengthened by the recent initiatives which were taken when our Honorable Prime Minister visited the United States of America. So, to understand this evolving relation, what we have done in this particular section, that we have divided it into several pillars, the first of them being the important trade aspect, where both of the countries has actually decided to sign mutually beneficial trade agreement, where the idea is that we are going to sign with USA a bilateral trade agreement by the end of the year 2025, which is currently under the formation by the US Trade Department, with the major objective to double our total bilateral trade to $500 billion by the year of 2030. Currently, this bilateral trade actually constitutes of around $129 billion. And in this direction, there were several positive steps which were actually taken by our government in the recently inaugurated Budget 2025 as well, where we actually kind of reduced down the tariff on various US products of interest, such as, for example, your agriculture commodities, your medical devices, your motorcycles, etc. Now, when we talk about India-US trade, the idea is that India enjoys a trade surplus with USA. Keep this point in your mind. Where, if we look at the data available to us by the month of August 2024, India was exporting around $54.7 billion worth of goods compared to $28.5 billion of import. Thus, we were registering a kind of a $26 billion of trade surplus. Keep this in mind that USA is a very major component of our economy's interest, considering that it actually accounts for our total 18% of our total export and 6% of our total imports. What are the products which we are actually exporting to USA? So the idea is we are exporting to USA various kind of pearls, electrical machinery, pharmaceutical products for around $7.6 billion worth, as well as various kind of mineral fuels and bituminous substances. And what are the components which we are importing from USA? So we are importing various kind of mineral fuels and oils of worth around $11 billion, various kind of pearls, semi-precious stones, nuclear reactors, mechanical appliances, as well as air and spacecraft, which constitute for around $2.7 billion. If we look into the recent year, we can see a rising trend, and that is the rising dependence of our country on the US market, where the people of US are acting as a quite big market for the products which are being produced in our country, because if we look at the share of USA in the overall export, it stood at around 12.4% back in the year of 2014, and it has increased substantially to 17.7% by the year of 2024. The idea is that obviously this has basically led to a kind of a huge trade surplus which we have, or a trade deficit which US has when it is trading with our country. And now with the recent president, who is Donald Trump, who has much more of a kind of a capitalistic approach, is actually trying to take efforts to reduce down this trade deficit which US is incurring with India. And to do that, one of the major pillar is actually to raise India's energy imports from USA. Now, when we talk about the kind of energy imports which we do with USA, it also has two important pillars. One is the oil import and other is the LNG import, right? The liquefied nitrogen gas import. Idea is what? If we look at India's top 5 crude oil supplier, Russia is the highest one, the largest supplier with 37% of the share. Iraq is the second largest. Saudi Arabia is the third. UAE is the fourth, and keep this in your mind that USA is the fifth largest oil supplier to our country, but its share in this oil supply is only a meager 3.2%. So now US is trying to push its oil supply to our country, to push its oil export. But the trade experts has actually given a viewpoint that if we look at the kind of a cost of shipping the oil from USA to our country, it cost us around $4 per barrel, which is actually double from the West Asia, where if we are kind of procuring from the West Asian regions, as for example Iraq, Saudi Arabia and UAE, it is actually costing us only $1.5 per barrel. So obviously it is much more cheaper for us here to actually procure from West Asia or Russia through the route of this West Asia altogether. Then when we talk about the crude grades, so various kind of different crude grades are actually suitable to create various kind of different petroleum products. So the idea is that we will also have to look at the kind of a compatibility of the US crude grades for different kind of petroleum products, whether it is suitable or not. And then when we are saying that we are actually going to import much more oil from USA, the idea is that oil is what? A kind of a fossil fuel. While we have taken a Panch Amrit target at the Glasgow summit in the COP26, where we have set for ourselves a kind of a nationally defined target to tackle the climate change under the larger objective of Paris Agreement, and that is what? That by the year of 2030, 50% of our energy supply will actually come from the renewable energy sources. So don't you think that when we are actually procuring much more oil to create energy, that is actually going to kind of compromise our Panch Amrit target? Thus it will lead to what? Further emission of greenhouse gases, further kind of impact the climate change, further induce global warming. And also remember at this particular stage that in a very recent judgment by the Supreme Court had held that the right against climate change is also an integral part or a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution, that is right to dignified life. So it is basically going to kind of deprive the citizens of their fundamental right as well. The idea which the article today is actually trying to put impetus upon is that we shall rather try to put impetus to procure more of the LNG supply from USA. Now when we look at the ranking of the LNG imports which we do, the largest import which we do is from Qatar, that is around 38%. US is the second largest LNG supplier to India with 20% share. The idea is that when we are procuring this LNG, it actually has a less role of the freight cost, considering that American LNG is already priced at a significant discount. At the same time, thus when we are going to procure this LNG, it will actually lead to the kind of a lower LNG import price than kind of procuring it from West Asia. Also, LNG from various geographies is broadly consistent. So this problem of compatibility will also not arise. So we shall rather focus upon what? Much more LNG imports. But even in this trade section, there are various issues which persist between India and USA. The first is obviously related to the kind of Indo-Pacific economic framework for prosperity, which was a kind of a US-led initiative, which comprises of 14 countries, including our country as well. The idea was to actually kind of streamline the logistics supply for various kind of critical minerals in the region of Indo-Pacific, to create a kind of a trade bloc which stands against China or kind of counter the China's hegemonic rise in the region of Indo-Pacific. But in this kind of Indo-Pacific economic framework, India did not join the trade pillar, the fourth important pillar. The reason for that was what? Because USA was not offering us any kind of tariff reduction, or it was not kind of offering us any kind of preferable market access to the economies of Indo-Pacific. So India chose only to remain a kind of an observer status in this trade section. So that is one of the major issues. That on one hand you are saying to reduce down the tariffs on your products, but at the same time you are not providing that tariff concession to our country under such initiatives. Second is that during the first tenure of the current President Trump 1.0, who actually follows a kind of a much more of a capitalistic model, USA actually kind of curtailed India's generalized system of preferences which we had to USA. What is this generalized system of preferences? This is a kind of a system or a mechanism where within your World Trade Organization system, where let's say for example if there is a developed nation, that is USA, and there is a developing country like our country, so this developing nation can sell its product or export its product to such developed nation, and that will be charged kind of a low tariff. So for example, earlier when the generalized system of preferences was applied to our country, India's product worth around $5 billion were having kind of duty-free access to US market. So that was curtailed as well. Don't you think it would have hampered our country's economy and industry? Then what is happening? Why US is taking such capitalistic approach in kind of trades and the kind of trade relations with various countries? The major issue is the issue of rising unemployment and fiscal deficit in USA altogether. So for example, currently the unemployment rate is the all-time high in USA, that is around 4%. Or the fiscal deficit of USA currently stands at around $1.3 trillion. And why this such high fiscal deficit has been incurred by the US government? Because of the high capital expenditure which it was doing to actually generate the jobs there. But now the government is saying that we will take a fiscal consolidation path. We will not spend that much. So the capitalist economy or the industries of USA shall come in to create these jobs. And they can create these jobs only when there will be kind of a demand for the product of the US-led industries. So for that purpose, you will do what? You will make sure that the products, good quality, cheap products of other developing nations like India does not reach to your market. So you will start doing what? Kind of adopting a kind of a trade protectionist measure. That is why also India was put on the priority watch list of USTR 301 report, which basically kind of lists the countries which have low IP protection or high IP or intellectual property theft rate. So that also curtailed the India's product to the USA. At the same time, the Global Trade Research Institute has actually commented that this is not a good time for India to sign such a bilateral trade agreement with USA, because the current government is not very much favorable to the free trade agreement principles, because USA has kind of FTA or free trade agreements with Canada and Mexico, but under Trump, various kind of tariffs were also imposed upon them, thus violating the principle of this FTA. And why USA is taking all of this capitalist approach? Just look at the kind of trade deficit which it has with various countries, such as for example with India, it has currently around $38 billion trade deficit. Just look at the trade deficit which USA has with China. At the same time, you can also see that how in the year 2024, the trade deficit with various countries has actually kind of shrinked a little bit. So that also reflects at the kind of the capitalist approach which is being followed by the USA. The second important pillar of the discussion today is the supply of critical minerals. First, try to understand that why this critical minerals has this term critical in them. Just look at the kind of critical minerals which has been listed here, very important for your prelims examination as well, and their uses in the various sunrise sector. For example, the use of neodymium, your praseodymium, samarium in the high performance magnets which are used in creation of various kind of missiles, fighter jets and radars. Or for example, lithium, cobalt and nickel and their uses in advanced batteries for energy storage and electrical vehicles. The gallium and indium which are used to create semiconductors and artificial intelligence hardware. The rare earth elements like for example europium and terbium and their uses in biotechnological imaging and medical diagnostics. As well as your scandium and heat resistant alloys which are used to create wind turbines and various kind of space technology products. So obviously they are very important for the sunrise sector, the sectors in which even India is trying to excel. But remember that 70% of this global rare earth element production and processing infrastructure is now under control of one country. Just look how China leads this critical mineral production with the share it has in copper, nickel, aluminium, cobalt, lithium, rare earth, manganese, natural graphite, etc. Almost kind of having monopoly in certain sections. So to tackle this kind of monopolization of the critical mineral supply by China, India and USA has signed several kind of agreements across the years. For example, recently when our Prime Minister visited, we have signed a trust initiative which stands for Transforming Relationship Utilizing Strategic Technology, the footsteps of which was in the process from 2020 itself, when the US Energy Act actually authorized $675 million for the creation of critical minerals mapping zones to actually kind of map critical minerals in USA and extract them. Then in the year of 2022, India and USA kind of launched a joint initiative on critical and emerging technology. Emerging technologies such as, for example, creation of semiconductors, artificial intelligence, hardware, processing, all of that. Then in the year of 2023, India and USA came up with a Mineral Security Partnership, MSP. The idea was to actually promote your development finance institutions as well as your export credit agencies to create a synergy of both of them to actually provide a kind of a good logistic supply for various kind of critical minerals between the two countries. And under this very same initiative, in the year of 2023, India also joined the Mineral Security Finance Network. So let's say, for example, if we want to do exploration of lithium in the Manda district of Jammu and Kashmir, we can get finance from this Mineral Security Finance Network, where the kind of big companies in USA will provide us certain grants for the exploration purpose. Then in the 2024, the USA government launched a $125 million grant for battery and critical mineral recycling program as well. Under the very same initiative, now both the government has come up with the trust initiative, which is nothing but the kind of much more further extension. It will give actually boost to our National Critical Mineral Mission 2024 as well, where the government of India has actually put around 16,000 crore rupees for what? For the exploration of various critical minerals, kind of extraction of them, then put them into the supply chain to actually create the semiconductors from our indigenous industries itself. For example, you guys can recall how in the previous analyst we were discussing about the various fabrication companies for semiconductors which has been set up by Tata. Then there is also focus on the active pharmaceutical ingredients, and remember, to create these APIs, it is actually very important, such rare earth elements. And remember that India is currently the world's second largest manufacturer of this active pharmaceutical ingredients just after China. So it is going to help us there as well. The idea is that the consumer good export, which we actually sell to the US, the largest share of that is actually formed by the pharma products. So it will actually further give impetus to our trade with US as well. And the idea is that under this trust initiative, we are actually going to reduce barrier to various kind of technological sharing, export controls, as well as further enhance the technology commerce. However, even in this trust initiative, there lies one leukemia. What is that? Is there any tax benefit which will we get from US Inflation Reduction Act? The answer is no. So that can act as a deterrent for various indigenous companies. Then in the defense sector, we have actually come up with USA called as Compact Initiative, where obviously the major idea is what? To counter China's belligerence in the Indo-Pacific. Under this Compact Initiative, we are also now going to procure F-35 stealth fighters from USA, where we have also signed an Autonomous System Industry Alliance and Defense Cooperation Framework. Then there are various procurement which we have done from US over the years, which is very important for your prelims examination, mentioned in the today's newspaper, such as, for example, your Sea Super Hercules, C-17 Globemaster, P-8I Poseidon aircraft, Chinooks helicopters, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and M77 Howitzer. Also, just look at the evolving defense relationship which we have with USA under our current Prime Minister's tenure. First, with Obama, we signed various kind of defense agreements, such as, for example, LEMOA, which basically provided us to share various kind of military logistics and supplies. Then various defense equipments we brought, such as, for example, Apache, Chinook, Poseidon, etc. Then under the Trump 1.0, we signed COMCASA, that basically stands for the kind of communication compatibility and security agreement. We also became the part of 2+2 dialogue, which we have, like where our external and defense minister, they share the seats with their ministers and we talk on the various kind of security issues. We also started our Tiger Triumph in exercise as well as the Industrial Security Annex was launched. Then the various other defense equipments which we procured like Seahawk helicopters, Howitzer, etc. Then under the Biden government, we signed the BECA agreement, which is actually a kind of a sharing of the geospatial military information as well. Also, we came up with the ICT Index X, strategic trade dialogue, human space flight cooperation. The idea is that despite such growing convergence, there still lies several challenges. First of them is obviously the kind of Russia-China convergence which we have seen in the recent years. Now, remember that India shares very close and strategic partnership with Russia. At the same time, the kind of China's maneuver on our border has actually led to kind of a turbulent relationship which we are sharing with China recently. So there is a kind of a dichotomy which exists, for example, where we have a kind of a cordial relationship with Russia, not cordial relationship with China, then cordial relationship with USA, but USA does not share cordial relationship between these two countries. However, it is expected to take a turn because Trump has kind of, forwarded a helping hand to Putin very recently. Then the idea is to keep the quadrilateral security dialogue in the region of Indo-Pacific. The quadrilateral security dialogue basically consists of 4 countries. They are basically India, USA, Japan and Australia. So when this quad was being created, the idea of USA was to create it as a kind of a military bloc in the sea region to counter China's presence there. But India has actually ensured the non-militarization of this security dialogue initiative. The reason for that is that India is the only country which actually shares the land boundary with China. And as Winston Churchill remarked in his day's time, that you should never bring the war to your neighborhood. That also led to basically the kind of the appeasement policy which Britain and France was following for Hitler in the year of 1930s. So idea is that we should keep this quad non-militarized. At the same time, the kind of this trade protectionist measure which USA do, the sanctions which it took on Iran when it actually backed off from the JCPOA. The JCPOA was basically an agreement which tried to curtail the nuclear armaments of Iran. That actually kind of very significantly hampered our interest, and that was not taken into the consideration. For example, earlier we used to import the majority share of our oil from the country Iran, but now it does not feature in the top 5. At the same time, recently we were discussing about the installment of the strategic projects like Chabahar because of these sanctions. At the same time, when USA is actually focusing upon de-risking the supply chain and make America great again model, obviously that is going to hamper our trade interest or our exporters' interest in the USA's economy as well. And there is also exists a kind of a policy blindness towards the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So for example, USA wants India's support to tackle China, but only in the region of Indo-Pacific. In the other regions, such as for example, when China is creating this China-Pakistan economic corridor, and that is actually traversing through the disputed line of control region. In this particular issues, we do not have that much support by the USA. Maybe that will change under the Trump. At the same time, with our country, we follow a kind of a socialistic model where we cannot just take such capitalistic measures like trade protectionist measures like how USA embarks upon under the Trump government. So that is going to be also a major challenge for our country in the future. Remember all of these challenges, try to solve this particular question, and we move forward to the next news. The editorial highlights the issue of glacial lake outburst flood in the Himalayan region and the issue of rebuilding Teesta Dam in Sikkim. The issue forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of geographical features and their location, and GS3 paper under the theme of disaster management. What is the context of the news? The context of the news is that in the month of January 2025, there was an expert committee which was formed by the Ministry of Environment which actually recommended to rebuild the Teesta Dam on Teesta River in Sikkim. Prior to that, there was already an existing dam which was actually destroyed by a powerful glacial lake outburst flood which took place in which lake? In the South Lonak Lake in the month of October 2023. So what is this concept of glacial lake outburst flood? Let's try to understand that. Let's imagine that there exists a glacier and a certain part of this glacier starts melting, and because of the mass movement it starts coming down. So this moving portion of ice over the course of its movement will obviously be accumulating a lot of debris, a lot of sand deposits, etc. And thus can we say that the mass of this ice debris will keep on increasing. This ice debris is actually called as glacial till. So as it is accumulating more and more mass, what does our weight actually stands for? Mass into gravity. So the mass is increasing because of the mass accumulation of various debris, sand, gravel deposits, etc. So can we say that the weight of this moving glacial tail will also keep on increasing? What happens with you when your weight actually increases a lot? You guys are not able to do the swifter movements which you used to do earlier. You feel tired very easily. You will just go for 1 kilometer walk and you will feel like sitting down. Exactly the same is also felt by this glacial till, where at one point of time it just sits down because of its weight and thus creates a landform. Now this landform has been created by what? By the kind of the ice structure. The ice structure which has also contains various kind of debris, sand, gravels, etc. And this landform created by the movement of the glacier or the glacial till is called as moraine. Now let's say, for example, in this Himalayan region, there is, because of the global warming induced climate change, the temperature of this Himalaya is increasing. You think I am lying? I am not. I am referring to the IPCC Assessment Report 4th, according to which between the year of 1950 to 99 itself, the temperature in this Himalayan region has actually increased by 2.5 degrees Celsius. And the report predicts that by the year of 2100, it is actually going to increase up to 9 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial level. So can we say that if the temperature is increasing, some glacier will actually melt and there will be a flow of water? Now there exists a kind of a moraine which has been created here, and this melting water will start accumulating in this region, and that is being held by what? By this moraine. So this will actually lead to kind of formation of a glacial lake. As the temperature in this particular region will keep on increasing, there will be much more inflow of the water in this particular lake. It will become much more difficult for this moraine to actually hold this water. What if a good portion of glacier, because of the melting process, actually just calves out and falls in this particular lake? This is called the process of calving. And when this material input will just fall into this lake, it will become kind of unbearable for the moraine to actually hold down this glacial lake because of the kind of a displacement wave which rise, that is called as seashore wave. And thus there will be a kind of an outflow of the water which will take place immediately. And if such moraine lake is formed at the kind of the foot of the glacier, then that particular moraine is called as terminal moraine. Remember this. So these are the key terms. We have understood that how the glacial lake outburst flood actually takes place. Now this flood can take place not only because of this calving process but because of several reasons, such as, for example, now we are actually referring to a kind of a research report which was published on the specific region of Sikkim back in the year 2018. So that showcased that how there can be various reasons for this GLOF occurrence. For example, cloudburst, snow avalanche, landslides, melting of ice in moraine, or for example, earthquake or the overflow which can take place here as well. So just see that how there is this normal moraine structure which was created. This is your moraine. If the displacement will take place over a period of time, that will lead to what? A kind of a glacial outburst lake flood, right? Now when we specifically talk about the region of Sikkim, the idea is that Sikkim has kind of lakes with area greater than 5 hectares. So they are huge lakes. A huge prospect of GLOF is actually possible in this region. The largest number of glacial lakes are observed in the altitudinal zone around the mean equilibrium line altitude or quite high in the mountains, right? Then in this 2018 study, there was actually a kind of a prospect which was made for the South Lonak Lake, from where this GLOF actually originated in year 2023, so 5 years before that itself, where the report actually kind of made the observation that the lake size has significantly increased because of the frequent melting of the glacier in the region. And there is a GLOF suspectability in the South Lonak Lake which can be caused because of the ice calving, degradation of ice core moraines, as well as outbursts from the North Lonak Lake. And that is exactly what took place. However, initially the government was claiming that no, it has been caused by the cloudburst. However, over a period of time, we actually realized that no, it was actually caused by because of the calving of the glaciers because of the impact of global warming. Now imagine the first lecture which we are reading about the more import of fossil fuels or oil from USA in this context. So basically the water washed away the Teesta dam which was created at the Chungthang region, right? This is basically how the Teesta comes here and flows in the Sikkim. Here is the capital of Sikkim as well. Now the idea is that there exists a kind of a Himalayan problem, and that is that the glaciers and the specter of the Gulf devastation faces the entire Himalayan region as the global warming provides new triggers to these young mountain ranges. And that can lead to what? Build-up of infrastructure, habitation, road networks, hydropower plants which has been created in this particular region, making them much more susceptible to this Gulf. And when this Gulf takes place, what it actually leads to? So that can lead to huge loss of life, huge loss of infrastructure, thus denting our demographic dividend, which is critical to become Viksit Bharat by the year of 2047. There can be loss of crop as well. That can actually compromise our food security. At the same time, if such Gulf is taking place, it can actually lead to huge devastation of the various kind of significant infrastructure or critical infrastructure which we have in that particular region. The biodiversity loss can take place as well, right? The idea is what? That the Gulf in Himalayas, there is increasing susceptibility to that. Because if we refer to the National Disaster Management Authority's report, it says that how 200 out of 8,800 glaciers in Himalayas are actually susceptible to such Gulf events. And in this Hindu Kush Himalayan report 2024, it was claimed that 33% of these glaciers are actually going to melt by 2100. Then very recently, there is a report by the Central Water Commission which actually says that how the glacial lakes in these Himalayan regions, they have increased by 10%. So the glaciers are melting and these glacial lakes are increasing, and any such event of calving, earthquake, cloudburst can lead to such Gulf events at the downstream regions between 2011 and 2024. And remember that as per the today's newspaper, the rate of melting is actually inversely proportional to the volume of glacier. So for example, the shrinking of the glacier, the retreating of the glacier, much more melting will now take place. And this melting has been further actually accelerated because of the black carbon which is being kind of released by the chimneys of various industries. They flow and that settle down on the ice of this glacier. So ice normally has, let's say, color of white. It is much more transparent and reflective to the sun's radiation. But because of the black carbon, it actually starts absorbing sun's radiations more, and that actually kinds of further intensify the melting process of these glaciers. Also remember that our Indian plate is actually moving and colliding with the Eurasian plate that basically created the Himalayas millions of years ago, and it is still moving about 2 centimeters per year. So basically it's a kind of a tectonic seismic zone. So a lot of earthquake and landslide can actually take place, further intensifying the events of Gulf in the region. And yes, obviously, one of the major impact is of the climate change, where Himalayas is the world's most vulnerable region to the climate change after the poles, and it is also called as third pole. Why? Because of the total area in which it has spread and the kind of the rivers which originate from here. So for example, your whole Indus river system, Brahmaputra system, Teesta system, Ganga system, all of that, and it feeds the people of countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar and Bangladesh, with several major river basins which are originating from this region of Himalayas. And these Himalayas, they actually provide or contains 4 global biodiversity hotspots with more than 35,000 fauna and 200 plus animal species. So estimated number of people who are at the disaster risk if such Gulf events will take place from these Himalayan regions are only 337 million. What is exactly the impact of the climate change on this particular region? So currently, if you are talking about 2.1 degrees Celsius temperature rise in Hindu Kush Himalaya, 33% of the ice loss, that was being predicted by the Central Water Commission. But if the temperature will rise by 2.7 degrees Celsius, then half of the ice will be lost. And if the emissions are not checked, we keep doing business as usual, then the temperature rise in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region will be around 5.6 degree, and that will lead to 2/3 or 66% of the ice loss. Just look at the kind of the temperature rise which actually has taken place from the year of 1960 onwards itself. So can we say that we are actually becoming much more prone to the Gulf? The answer is yes. So there are several steps, short-term strategies and long-term strategies which we can adopt under the larger National Gulf Risk Mitigation Program, which you guys can write in your mains answer. Just have a quick look at what are the steps which were actually taken when such Gulf took place in Sikkim. So for example, first field expedition of Glacial Lake was conducted. 3 pipelines were installed. early warning system was set in place. The Central Water Commission actually initiated an advisory to evaluate the South Lonok Glacier altogether. These are the strategies which we can take in the short term for development of an early warning system, where we can actually use ISRO's National Remote Sensing Center to create a kind of a glacial lake atlas. We can use the synthetic aperture radar imagery. We can do engineering interventions, as for example lake water siphoning, so we can kind of pump out the water from these lakes which has been accumulated over a period of time. We can widen the discharge channels to these lakes. We can also hire expert agencies for the identification of suspectable sites. In the long term, we should enhance the mitigation measures by lowering down the kind of the dam's structure. We can determine the structural strength of the various moraine dams which has been created, that how long they will be able to sustain the water which has been accumulated. We can maintain an ecological flow in these lakes. Then we shall also try to create an app which can actually disseminate the information about such glove disasters. Also, in the long term, we can create Apada Mitra or volunteers in the various Himalayan states which can actually kind of involve themselves in various kind of rehabilitation and rescue process if such disaster is taking place. And for that purpose, awareness among the larger public about disaster management is of the utmost importance. To the people who are giving prelims, this is kind of important things which you shall learn for the prelims examination. So, as for example, major hydroelectric projects in the northeast, Suban Seri in Arunachal Pradesh, Naing project which is on Siom River in Arunachal, Italian project which is on Dibang River in Arunachal, your Doyang project in Nagaland, Manu project in Tripura, and your Umling Dam which is on Umyam River in Meghalaya. Can any one of you tell me there is a river in Meghalaya which is considered to be the cleanest river in our country? What is the name of that river? Also, a little bit facts about Teesta river. So it basically originates from the Ponhuri mountains of eastern Himalayas in Sikkim itself, not in Tibet. It flows basically in two states, Sikkim and West Bengal. Remember, it is the largest river of Sikkim and second largest river of West Bengal. And it merges with the Jamuna river in Bangladesh. So it flows to Sikkim, to Bangladesh, to West Bengal, reaches to Bangladesh, and there it joins another river called as Jamuna and finally drains in Bay of Bengal. The major tributaries of this Teesta river are your Rangpo, Rani Khola and Rangi. So remember these facts, try to attempt this question. We move forward to the next news, where we'll try to learn about a major government initiative related to health sector, and that is Ayushman Bharat. As recently, with the change in the government in Delhi, the state government of Delhi is now trying to envisage to enroll themselves in this Ayushman Bharat scheme, which is the world's largest healthcare scheme. Ayushman Bharat, that also stands for your Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So under this world's largest health insurance scheme, the government envisages to provide rupees 5 lakh insurance per family per year, where you guys can use this 5 lakh rupees to avail any kind of secondary and tertiary healthcare. So for example, if you want to go for neurosurgery, or if you want to go for the treatment of cancer, for all such secondary and tertiary healthcare, you can avail the kind of rupees 5 lakh which is being provided to you by the government of India. Remember that it is a centrally sponsored scheme. So for hilly states and non-northeastern states, the center share stands for 60%. That basically means that out of 5 lakh, 3 lakh rupees is being provided by the central government and 2 lakh rupees is being provided by the state government. Now, in which hospitals can I go? Can I go only in a government hospital? No. You can also go in the private healthcare sector or private hospitals which are impaneled under this Ayushman Bharat Yojana. Can any one of you go? No. Only the people who are identified under the socio-economic census of 2011. Basically, the idea of the scheme is to actually help the bottom 40% income quintile of our country. So the people who, let's say for example, falls under the category of below poverty line. Remember that there exists no restriction either on family size or gender, and at the same time there is an application of family floater basis. So that basically means that, let's say for example, if I am suffering from any disease and I am availing a treatment of 1 lakh rupees, and there is sister of mine, she also wants to, let's say for example, avail the treatment. So she can avail the treatment in the remaining 4 lakh corpus. So there is a 5 lakh corpus for the whole family. So there is a family floater basis. One or more members of the family can avail treatment at the very same time. At the same time, there is interstate operability as well. So this is very helpful for the migrant workers of our country. The nodal agency to implement this is your National Health Authority, which is basically a kind of an autonomous organization created under the Registration of Societies Act 1860. So remember, it is not a statutory body. And let's say, for example, if there is any fraud which has been taken place, for example, you have come from a very wealthy family, but still you have availed some certificate related to poverty and you want to, just avail some kind of free healthcare treatment. So to check such kind of malpractices, there exists a unit called as National Anti-Fraud Unit. What are the expenses which has been covered under the scheme? So the medical examination and consultation fees, pre-hospitalization up to 3 days, post-hospitalization up to 15 days, even if I am going to be admitted in the intensive care unit ICU, as well as any kind of medical implantation, all of that is covered under the Ayushman Bharat. However, in this particular scheme, there lies several kind of challenges, and that was basically the reason that the earlier government, which was in the New Delhi, that was reluctant to join this particular scheme. What are the issues? First is obviously the frauds and the abuse cases which has been covered under the Ayushman Bharat. For example, one of them, the first is the treatment of dead patients. Sounds a bit absurd, but yes, indeed this is happening. Let's say, for example, imagine that I am suffering from any kind of incurable disease. Let's say, for example, love. And then I go to the hospital and I get impaneled under this Ayushman Bharat. And as the luck would have it, I die after 3 days. But the hospital will keep on treating me for the next 7 days so that they can charge a hefty bill from the government of India for the next 10 days. And this was exactly what was happening. Just see here, around 7 crore of amount was actually paid in the name of the patients who actually died in the previous hospital visits. Then various peoples are availing various kind of fraud practices, such as, for example, creating various kind of fake IDs, and this is actually being done by various private hospitals as well as government hospitals who are also part of this chain, where there are several registration on the name of the same patient or the same ID to avail much more kind of corpus from the government of India. For example, there was a kind of a CAG report, the Comptroller and Auditor General report on this scheme, which actually highlighted that how only 7.5 lakh patients were registered on one single number, and that is this. For example, just look here, 39.5 lakh actually claimed without Aadhaar or biometric authentication more than once. 1,679 crore amount of money paid as claim for these cases, in which the Kerala has topped the list. 1,679 crore from home, from the taxes of the common people, given to these fraudulents. Then in many of the times, the kind of the size of the household which is being claimed, that stands unrealistic. And in various cases, what is happening, that these private hospitals, they are taking over the functions of the public hospital. So let's say, for example, I belong to a rural area and I go to any public hospital. But let's say that there exists a kind of an overburdened secondary and tertiary infrastructure, specifically in the rural area. So I impanel myself, let's say, in a private hospital. Now what these private hospitals are doing, that they are treating these patients, but they are charging almost 6 to 7 times more for the same treatment than the government hospital. So they are actually kind of showing the bills which are quite high than it should be, actually taking over the kind of the function of the public hospitals. Then let's say, for example, as in rural area, I just want to get the treatment under Ayushman Bharat. I am a very poor person. You don't have to imagine I am poor. So idea is what? I go to the any kind of, let's say, government hospital, burden infrastructure, hospital does not exist. What I will do? I will go to a private hospital. How I will get to know whether this private hospital is impaneled under Ayushman Bharat or not, if there does not exist any single database for private hospital as per Ministry of Health? Then let's say, for example, what after the treatment, this private hospital tells me that no, we are not impaneled, right? We were doing a prank with you. Look, there is a camera, right? So then what will happen? Let's say after rupees 5 lakh as well, what if I go and enroll myself in a private hospital and they give me the bill, which is a kind of a final bill, and that bill is crossing the limit of 5 lakh. Let's say even if it is 7 lakh, from where I will get that 2 lakh rupees extra? I will be asking the money from someone, and that can lead to high indebtedness in the rural area. And because of these fraudulent issues, there is a kind of a various denial of the claims by the government as well as various insurance agencies, that many of the people that does not have proper documents to actually show that they belong to the kind of, let's say, below poverty line, and that is basically leading to various kind of high denial rates. Thus, various hospitals, they are actually denying the patients altogether, right? Thus, to tackle with all of these issues, there are several steps which is required. Remember the certain key factors about these schemes, such as, for example, if you look at our health insurance, 22% of the overall financing of the health insurance actually comes from the government. Household expenditure actually leads to 67%. If we talk about the health insurance penetration in our country, the number of policies which were issued was around 13 million, and the average amount per claim was around 25,000. Just look at the foreseeable challenges which we have discussed. The kind of enrollment of ghost beneficiaries, impersonation, conversion of OPD patients into IPD patients, deliberate blocking of higher price package, treatment of disease which a hospital is not equipped for, doctors performing unnecessary procedures. Even from the government, there is not a significant increase in the allotment in the budget to this Ayushman Bharat scheme. For example, in this year's budget as well, only 28% hike has been done. However, the government has taken several innovative steps, as for example, it has expanded the insurance coverage to achieve the idea of SDG 3.8, that is universal health coverage by 2030. So now recently the government has said that all the senior citizens who are above the age of 70 years, irrespective of any income which you guys have, you fall in the poverty line or not, you will be availing this Ayushman Bharat or health insurance scheme. And in the budget 2025, the government has said that 1 crore gig workers can now also avail the treatment under this Ayushman Bharat. So remember all of these important facts, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to talk about a very important international initiative, and that is the 8th Indian Ocean Conference, which has featured in the news, which is going to take place where? In Muscat, in Oman. It is being hosted by 3 countries together, that is India, Singapore and Oman. It is actually a kind of a flagship consultative forum for the regional affairs in the region of Indian Ocean, which is strategically very important. So India Foundation actually conducts this, which is a kind of a think tank policy forum, and it is conducting this since the year of 2016. The first was actually conducted in Singapore, and this forms an important component of India's larger perspective to ensure its role as net security provider in the region of Indo-Pacific under the initiative of security and growth for all in the region called as SAGAR. This year theme is what? Voyages to the new horizon of maritime membership. From your prelims perspective, certain key facts about Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean, which was termed by the 16th century Portuguese traveler Ferdinand Magellan as Mar Pacifico, or the area of peace, because of the calm water it has. It is the 3rd largest ocean. So if we talk about the size of the ocean, you guys can remember it in this way, PASA. So peace, Pacific, Atlantic, 3rd is Indian Ocean, then there is your Southern Ocean, and finally your Arctic Ocean. Then it basically comprises of what? 20% of the water area of Earth's surface, which touches the shore of how many countries? 26 countries. It is economically very important, considering 80% of the world's seaborne trade in oil, 70% of the world's container traffic, as well as for our country, as 80% of our external trade and 90% of the energy trade take place through the route of this Indian Ocean. Then there are certain key terms which has appeared today in the newspaper, such as, for example, Manigramam, Chettis and Nanadesis. Who were these people? They were basically the kind of the merchants who used to sail in this Indian Ocean. And then there were various dynasties who had created various ports because of the kind of the extensive maritime trade which used to take place in Indian Ocean. For example, the important ports of Bhrigukach, Kalyani and Suparaka, the important ports of Satvahana dynasty, your Tamralipti port in the region of West Bengal, the Motupalli, which was a port of Kakatiya dynasty, the Arikamedu and Pumpuhar, which was a port of Cholas, the Tuticorin and Korkai, which was a port of Pandyas, and ultimately the Calicut and the Mujris, which was a port of which particular dynasty? The Chera dynasty. The name of those dynasties has been mentioned here. The article suggests that how the Kautya's Arthashastra also talks about the function of officers like port commissioners and harbour masters, highlighting the importance which was attached to this maritime activity. That can also be seen the kind of the expedition which was taken by Rajendra Chola, right, who was the successor of Raja Raja Chola. Raja Raja Chola who built the Brihadeshwara temple. Now you guys can relate. So Rajendra Chola in the year of 1025 CE actually raided the Sri Vijaya Empire, which is currently the modern day Indonesia. Why? Because this Sri Vijaya Empire was actually trying to block the Strait of Malacca in the Indian Ocean, right, which connects basically the Andaman Sea to the region of Indonesia. So he was trying to curtail this particular trade passage, the strait. Why he was trying to do that? Because he wanted to kind of monopolize his trade with China. That is why Rajendra Chola in the year of 1025, which is also called as kind of a first surgical strike by an Indian ruler, attacked the 14 ports of Sri Vijaya Empire, leading to the fall of it in Indonesia. Then the article also talks about Faxian's description of Ceylon, that is basically Sri Lanka, to Sri Vijaya, that is Indonesia. Faxian, who actually wrote a book called as Fugoji, or the account of Buddhist kingdoms, and he came to our country from the year of 399 to 412. Can any one of you tell me which Gupta ruler was actually ruling at this time period when Faxian came to our country or Fahin came to our country? My suggestion to all of you is that this particular ruler was the successor of Samudragupta. Comment your answers. Then the article also talks about that how later the European powers like Portuguese, Dutch, French and British, they also developed stronger navies, converting this Indian Ocean region into a kind of a colony. For example, you guys can recall the policy of blue water from your modern history, which was launched by the first Portuguese Governor General, who was Francisco de Almeida. What is this policy of blue water? These Portuguese, they basically started blocking these important straits like Gulf of Aden, Bab el Mandab, this Strait of Malacca, by kind of putting their warships, which were called as caravels and carracks. So let's say, for example, I am an Indian ship and I'm kind of traveling in this region. I'm importing or exporting my good. These Portuguese ships used to charge a kind of a toll or duty from me, and if I am not paying that, then these caravels and carracks will attack me and will sink down my ship. So the kind of the Arabian merchants, they went to home to Mamluk Sultan of Egypt and requested them that look at these Portuguese, they are not letting us trade in the Indian Ocean region. This Mamluk Sultan of Egypt attacked these Portuguese fleets in the Indian Ocean in the Battle of Chaul 1508, in which Lourenço, who was basically the son of Almeida, was killed. So that basically the Portuguese were defeated in the Battle of Chaul 1508. However, Almeida had the last laugh, because in the Battle of Diu, when the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt, the Ottoman Sultan, the Zamorin of Calicut, the ruler of Gujarat at that point of time, all of them formed a union against these Portuguese fleets in the Indian Ocean. All of them were jointly defeated by whom? By Francisco de Almeida, thus leading to a kind of a monopolization of the Portuguese in this region. However, the article suggests that the Britishers did not build such a strong navy in this region. And that is a kind of a tradition which we have continued even today. Because if we look at India's share in the shipbuilding, it stands at a mere 0.6% of the shipbuilding activity in the world. So this is a kind of an area where we still need to focus upon. Keep all of these facts in your mind. We move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand that how this concept of reciprocal tariff actually works. The idea is, first we'll try to understand that why this reciprocal tariff is so much in the news. So you guys can relate this particular section with the first news as well. The idea is that US President Donald Trump has actually unveiled a plan to hit the whole world with a reciprocal tariff, potentially signaling the end of existing trade rules and sending things back almost a century in terms of how countries do business with one another. Let's try to understand that what is this concept of tariff. Tariffs are basically the taxes which are imposed by an importing country on foreign goods coming into their country. So for example, if I want to promote my indigenous industry, I will be putting tariff of any kind of product which are coming from outside. This was exactly the concept of British mercantilism. So for example, there was a time when India was producing 25% of the GDP of the world in the starting of 18th century. The Indian products were flooding the British markets. What Britishers did? They were kind of acquiring political power in our country at that point of time. They said that, okay, we should not let these good quality Indian products flood the markets of London. Thus, they kind of started putting trade protectionist measures like Calico Act of 1720, where they completely banned the chintz which was being procured from the region of Masulipatam in Andhra Pradesh at that point of time. At the same time, they started giving their products, which they started producing in their industries after the industrial revolution of 1750, imperial preferences. That basically meant that the products which is now coming to India, it will not be charged any kind of import duty or custom duty on that. So obviously their product will become what? Much more cheaper in our country. And thus the British product started flooding our market. That's how the R.C. Dutt in the economic history of India has remarked that by the year of 1880, 2 by 3rd of every cloth which was worn by Indians had a British tag. The idea is that for a consumer, this particular such kind of a tariff, they raise the price of an imported good and in effect throw mud in the wheels of a global trade. However, after World War II, the world actually moved towards the freer trade in the goods, that is lower tariff or no tariffs at all. The developed nation had this understanding that such free trade is mutually beneficial for all, and that is basically the policy of laissez-faire, which was actually propounded by whom? Adam Smith in the book which he wrote called as Wealth of Nation, leading to various countries signing the free trade agreements and the bilateral trade agreements. But there is an important caveat, and that is that the rule of world trade were being framed. The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade and the World Trade Organization, it was agreed that developing countries will get a special and differential treatment. Just like how we were discussing generalized system of preferences, if you guys can recall. The idea was that the developing countries having lower tariff than the developing one was considered to be a fair deal. Why? Because it actually ensured that the developing countries like India will not be flooded with the cheap food grains which are produced by the rich farmers in Europe and the US. Right? So basically what we'll do, we'll apply more tariffs for developed nation products. But Trump is saying that no, from now onwards, I am going to apply a reciprocal tariff. That basically means same level of tariff on each product that enter in US and that basically goes out of US. So for example, the kind of generalized system of preferences that will not exist for countries like India. And does that will impact Indian industries? The answer is yes. Look at the kind of the advantage which we were having in comparison to other countries because of the kind of the lower tariff which were being kind of put on our products. So the article is basically suggesting that why US is taking actually such a step, because US trade deficit with rest of the world is actually closing on $1 trillion and China on the other hand is enjoying $1 trillion surplus. But are the trade deficit always bad? That's what the question ponders. The idea is that US trade deficit with India does not indicate that more money is actually flowing out of the US than coming in it. Why? Because it can also appear to be a marker of an American dependence on our country, on our products. At the same time, remember that we might be having trade surplus with US, but at the same time, we are also having a trade deficit with China as well. So it's not like only a win-win situation for us. Also, the trade deficit or surplus show the relative strength of one country's exporters vis-a-vis the others. So that means maybe our products are high much in demand in US market. Our exporters are actually doing quite good. It cannot be solely because of the policies of the government of India. At the same time, it also indicates that consumers are able to enjoy goods at a cheaper price because let's say for example, if there are so many competitors, so many products which are coming from different parts of the world, there can be a kind of a good price discovery which can be taken place. Otherwise, that will lead to the monopolization of market, right? Idea is, while the sustainable way to remove deficit do exist to boost domestic product efficiency, economic wisdom lies in understanding not just that no country enjoys such absolute advantage. So that is something Trump will have to understand. What will the impact of this on our country? Such tariff imposition. India is likely to buy more and more US goods, such as defense equipment and oil and gas as we were discussing. It is also possible that the other US good will become cheaper and thus much more affordable for Indians in the coming days. But that basically means that if the demand for the US product is rising, we will be paying in what? US dollar. So the demand for US dollar will rise as well. And thus in comparison to that, the demand for Indian rupee will decline. So can we say that the Indian rupee will weaken or depreciate? Right? And that basically means what? If Indian rupee is depreciating, we'll have to pay much more to buy the same product. So that can lead to inflation in our economy. That can be a major issue. So keep these important economic key concepts in your mind and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to talk about a very important government scheme which actually featured in one of the editorials. The scheme is your production linked incentive scheme. The idea was that how it is a very important component of Make in India component, where the large scale electronics manufacturing, especially of smartphone, is actually one of the important pillars of Make in India. And this production linked incentive scheme, which was first launched in the electronics industry in 2020, has actually witnessed an increased allocation in the recent budget, which shows the importance of this scheme as well. Why the scheme was launched? Because of the various global supply chain disruption. It was actually realized that we shall put impetus on Make in India to actually become kind of self-reliant, to further boost the domestic manufacturing, to create jobs, the same kind of step which America is taking under the kind of Make America Great Again model, and to actually kind of reduce our reliance on various kind of high import. So this production linked incentive scheme was actually launched in 14 sectors with outlay of 1.97 lakh crore in the year of 2020, where the industries actually get incentive based upon the incremental sale. What is the concept? So let's say, for example, in the year of 2024, there is a company. The company name is Power. The company Power actually produced, let's say, for example, 100 products, and each of them were costed 10 rupees. So basically the company had a sale of 1000 rupees. Next year, the company actually produced 200 products. All of them, let's keep price at a uniform. So let's say the sale was of around 2000. So in this increased sale of 1000 which has been incurred by the company, it will be provided by the government certain kind of subsidies. On what? Let's say, for example, on taxation or on further capital investment, or if it is buying further products. So these subsidies provided by the government will actually lead to what? It will boost the manufacturing. And if the manufacturing is increasing, it will also create further employment. The employment will lead to kind of increased propensity to consume and propensity to demand. So it will create a kind of a positive cycle in Indian economy. These were the 14 sectors which were covered, like medical devices, auto components, pharmaceutical drugs, specialty steels, food products, your white goods like air conditioners and LED as well. The idea is that this PLI scheme has generated 12.5 lakh crore rupees in the production in the year of 2024 and 9.5 lakh job across various sectors since 2020. The investment realized is around 1.46 lakh crore. The production value is this much. The employment generated as well as export of 4 lakh crore rupees has been done because of this PLI scheme. So remember these key features, and we move forward to the last news of the day, where we are going to study about a very important statutory body which has actually featured in the news, and that is State Information Commission. So let's try to have a comparative analysis of Central Information Commission as State Information Commission, both of them which are very important statutory bodies and non-constitutional bodies created under which act? Under the Right to Information Act 2005. Now, in Central Information Commission, there is appointment of a Central Information Commissioner and up to 10 Information Commissioners. Same structure is also followed in State Information Commission as well. Here, the Chief Information Commissioner is appointed by the President. The State Information Commissioner is appointed by the executive head of the state, that is Governor. Here, the Selection Committee for Central Information Commission constitutes of Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and a Cabinet Minister, which is a nominee of Prime Minister. In Selection Committee of State Information Commission, the Prime Minister is replaced by Chief Minister, Leader of Opposition, Cabinet Minister. The tenure of both State Information Commission and Central Information Commission is decided by central government or up to the 65 years. Can the Chief Information Commissioner or State Information Commissioner can be reappointed again? The answer is no. But an Information Commissioner can be promoted to become a Chief Information Commissioner. Keep this in your mind. Then came, for example, your RTI Amendment Act of 2019. It changed certain things. It said that from now onwards, the center will notify the tenure of all Information Commission at state and central level both. The salaries and allowances will be decided by central government as well. And if such officials are receiving pension or other retirement benefits, their salaries will be reduced by amount equal to pension. Now this has been removed completely. Recently, this both SIC and CIC was frequently in the news because of the issue of vacancies which exist here. For example, commissioners up to 42 posts are vacant and 165 sanctioned posts for Chief Information Commissioners and Information Commissions lies vacant across the country. So keep this important issue in the mind, and with this we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.